Welcome, bienvenue, welcome once again to another live stream. This is Cladding Matters, the weekly show where we really look at what the hell is going on, especially within the world of cladding, and really focusing on such locations as Royal Artillery Quays, of which Steve Day has been, dare I say it, a locked-in component of for quite some time, and actually were actively organising some sort of protest, if one can call it that, to try and improve building safety. Buildingsafetyscheme.org. I'm just going to plug that right now. Hamish McClay helped me set up this channel, and I think before we get any further, we should mercilessly throw him under the bus. Hamish, over to you.
The interesting thing about this week, although it is entitled Cladding Matters, and it does relate to cladding, it also relates to much more of what is actually on the brief, or should be on the brief, of councillors, elected councillors, that we assume to be elected to actually look after us from a local perspective. Yes, we can understand that there happen to be political parties, and there needs to be that overriding aspect, I guess, that we want to be working with that local party. However, I do actually sort of feel personally, whilst any elected member of parliament, one would hope, would be looking after the residents within his constituency and take note of what they are, the struggles, if they happen to have any, one would expect much, much more from a local councillor. Now, what we've got before us today, to actually sort of have a comment on this, I was a paper councillor, or paper potential councillor. I was in the elections sort of early last month on the 1st of May. So I really didn't do very much at all, in fairness. I gave people the opportunity to vote for me. Steve, on the other hand, he did actually put up an awful lot of work to get himself elected on the council, because he was actually very much supportive of what Chris had been doing previously. So basically, Steve did a lot of hard work and nearly got there. Chris was in a position. He himself was actually a fully elected councillor. So between the three of us, particularly those two who did the hard work, and particularly Steve, who's involved, Steve and Chris, to be quite honest, there's so much knowledge which they actually have through their own experience of working with a very challenging council as well. So it's probably best to hand over to them now.
Well, let's start off. Chris, welcome to the show. Today's topic is, whose side actually are the councillors on? Because it seems to me, before you launched your extreme rebuttal, I'm sure, it seems to me that even when presented with absolute black and white evidence to the exact contrary of the position they take, they double down and they just blindly ignore. Now, it worries me that in a completely different location, the same councillors, when pointed at a location that was suffering again with dodgy building issues, they quickly got in there and got stuck in. Why are they not on Royal Artillery Quays? And it just seems to me that they may well be in bed with the builder. What say you?
Okay, well, look, thanks for having me on. I think, first of all, you're right to focus on Royal Artillery Quays. Not only did I represent Royal Artillery Quays on Greenwich Council, the area that Royal Artillery Quays is in, West Thamesmead, but I actually did live there, and lived there for a number of years. So I know the area exceptionally well, and as you said in your intro, I know Steve very well. Yeah, so I was an elected member of Greenwich Council for 10 years before I stood down to move to Wales last year. I mean, the point that you made about councillors being in bed with builders, developers, I can't speak to that. I mean, they work very closely together, very closely indeed together through planning. I think there are a lot of good house builders out there. I think there are a lot of problems with house builders out there. I think there are great councillors, and I think there are not so great councillors. But I mean, one of the things that really used to frustrate me when I was a councillor is people used to say when I sat on a planning board, "Oh, you and your brown envelopes, you councillors." Well, look, I never witnessed anything like that, so I'm incredibly careful when it comes to throwing around language like that. But there is a great deal of close working going back a number of years, and actually crossing the work of a number of governments of different colours. I think councils. Not all councils no longer having their own in-house building safety teams. I think that is massive trouble, particularly when it comes to planning, because now there's a situation where councillors and councils rely on external consultancies to come in and certify that new developments have passed building safety. I think that muddies the water significantly with these consultancies. There's a lot of crossover with the people moving from consultancy to builder.
And dare I say it, some might even say marking their own homework potentially.
I mean, you could certainly make that accusation. And these kind of rule changes were all brought in by governments of various colours because there was arguments made that houses weren't and developments were held up and houses weren't being built and supplied because of regulation, and regulation was holding back the system. So various governments cut back on regulation, changed the rules around regulation, and we've ended up in the situation we're in. But we then didn't get the corresponding increase in the number of houses and developments. So
hang on, so we've got two issues here, have we not? We've got one that there were building regs which didn't seem to be up to snuff and have moved on now and potentially are better, but still not good enough. As Steve will no doubt expound soon, much watered down beyond where they should be. And then the second issue is that we were promised more houses, and that hasn't happened either.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. And we're in a situation now where councils have been stripped back to the core. So look, I'm a great defender of local democracy. I'm a great defender of local councils and local councillors as a group. Like I say, I served as one for 10 years. At some point in the future, I might decide to stand for local government again. Since I've moved house, but it does great work with not a lot of resources, but it's been cut back to the bone over years. That's a separate issue. We're in a situation now where officers are within councils are swamped and are expected to be all over the detail and sometimes struggle. Councillors, it's for many it's not a full-time role, and that as I mentioned earlier, there is a varying quality of councillor. It's a very much a spectrum of people being engaged to not engaged, over detail to not over detail at all. All you have to do is live stream some of the scrutiny sessions that come from councils to see the quality of some of the councillors that make it. There is a problem there, but also they don't have time to be over the detail. They don't ask probing questions, and in some councils, officers present reports for councillors, council political groups to agree, and quite often, they find themselves nodded through, with councillors not being in a position to be over the level of detail or relying on cabinet members who.
And I hear all of that, and I frankly agree with you. And I have sat in on some of those sessions, and some of them are on the money, and others are laughable. But beyond that, one thing I want to just run by you. There was a statement made by Greenwich Council going back that at the time of building, there was no case to answer with regards to building regs, to Royal Artillery Keys, when that was been demonstrably not the case. And in fact, Steve has a plethora, I think plethora being the right word, of evidence to demonstrate that at the time it didn't conform. And then Greenwich rode back and said, oh, no, we're actually neutral. We don't have we already did make a statement. So they'd have to kind of row back on that statement first before they can make themselves neutral. And now they're saying, buzz off. Stop looking over here, look over there. Now, I know that's very fashionable in politics at the moment, but it doesn't appear to be very helpful.
Yeah, it's not helpful at all. Look, as I said, there are people in Greenwich doing some very good work, and there are times when Greenwich has been caught with its trousers down, and sadly, Royal Artillery Quays is one of those examples. And I'm going to give a lot of credit and say I think this is cock up over conspiracy, but yeah, Steve has done some amazing work in exposing.
Yeah, but our problem is, and I think Steve would agree with me. Forgive me, I'm not coming for you, Steve, Chris. I'm just frustrated. I'm just frustrated with the whole thing. But it seems to me that okay, cock up, fine, all right. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen watching, Chris is not straining under the weight of my questioning. He is literally boiling up over there. So apologies.
It is really warm.
But no, let me get back to my acid questioning once more. The question that seems to boil my what's-its is that once it's been made absolutely clear that people who we would call specialists in the field have stated no, at the time of building it, it was contravening building regs, even then, and they still double down, even once they can be shown. They won't admit to it and then move past it. And the trouble is that actually causing problems for Steve. In fact, before I'm not going to let you answer, Steve, would you come to the table, please? And if you could unmute yourself briefly there. Thank you. Am I right in thinking that uncontrovertibly you produced evidence that trashes the original statement made by Greenwich that there was no case to answer?
Yeah, so, I mean, basically Greenwich Council's position is that based on all available information, and we sent them the majority of all the evidence back in 2024, that there is no evidence of building regulation breaches at the time of construction, i.e. no unlawful construction by Barratt. Well, we found that to be false. The most basic example is the fire doors. Chris will know this because he's lived there. Between the stairs and the lift, there's meant to be a fire door separating, the lift and stairs, and there isn't. You can walk from the inside door from the outside, and then go straight to the lift, and there's no fire door between the stairs and the lift, and that's breach of building regs. It was called out by Greenwich Council's building control.
Because those stairs, as far as the fire brigade is concerned, are supposed to be protected so that they could use them. But there's no way they could do it. It would be unusable.
But the key thing is, if you want to see a building regulation breach at the time of construction, just go and look at the fire doors. They don't exist between the stairs and the lift. And there's so many more. There's plastic fixings in the fire breaks. There's holes in the internal walls. There was an IMS report that found 8 flats, found 457 defects. The reports say prosecution should be considered because the defects are so bad. And these are all breaches at the time of construction. This is pointed out to Greenwich Council over 6 weeks, and they will not retract their position. And the reason this matters is because we have an internal remediation that's not signed off, and we're fighting for a full Type 4 in remediation. But the builder wants to do a Type 2, which is like just above the front doors. And to have a finding from the council, there's no evidence. That's the problem.
Chris, do you want to jump in there? Sorry.
Yeah, I would if that's okay. So, look, I mean, the history of Royal Artillery Quays is one matter, but one of the things that I really focused on in my time as the councillor for the area was how do we, all this has happened and it's awful. There has been failings, and there is enough blame to go around with Barratt and a litany of people that have popped up, said yes, this is awful, then disappeared again. There are some people that have done some great work. Actually, Matthew Pennycook did some great work when he was the MP for the area in flagging the issue. It's no longer in his constituency now, but I've got a lot of time for Matthew Pennycook. But when I was a councillor there, one of the things I wanted to do, again, before I moved away and resigned, was to bring forward a solution that would not only benefit people in Royal Artillery Quays, but also try and set a precedent across Greenwich, so that whenever building and fire safety issues were identified, and the original builder was forced, and remember, it took a long time to get to the stage where the original developer was brought back kicking and screaming to remediate their own work. The situation that I've posed was that the original when remediation work was scheduled to take place, that actually the work that should be done to such a standard, to the highest standard, not just taken to a standard that was, okay, that will do. We have done enough to satisfy the EWS1 process to take it to the bare minimum. So,
yeah, but what's really irritating right now is that insurers won't give decent levels of insurance on that EWS1 bare minimum.
Yes. So yes, absolutely. So look, I speak as someone that's represented an area that's been through this and owns a flat that has got an EWS one certificate, and I've been through the heartache, the sleepless nights, the worry about, is this bill going to land? Am I living in a safe building? So I've lived it, I've represented it, and now I'm talking about it. So my solution was, and I bought this, bought a motion to Greenwich Council, and sorry, it was some time ago, so the exact wording is, I can actually, the passage of time hasn't been kind to me, so I've forgotten parts of it. But the gist of it was that whenever work is done, Greenwich Council expects it to be done to this level, not this level. And I, at the time, was a Liberal Democrat councillor. I'm still a member of the Liberal Democrats, but I was for many years, 19 years in fact, a member of the Labour Party, and 9 of my 10 years on the council was as a Labour councillor. So I like to think that I had the ability to reach across party lines to the ruling Labour group. I have a great relationship, had and still have a great relationship with the leader of the Greenwich Conservatives, Councillor Matt Hartley. So I brought a non-political motion to the council and sought backing to get it on the council agenda for one of my last meetings before I resigned. I actually moved to Wales before I resigned. I wanted to stay as a councillor to get this over the line before I resigned, before I, picked up my life and moved it to the other side of the country, to another country, in fact. So I didn't resign straight away. I wanted to get this done before I left. Now, I won't bore you with council rules, but to get something on the agenda, it needs a proposer and it needs a seconder. So in the interest of being cross-party, I approached my co-councillor, my then co-councillor, Councillor Lade Olugbemi. And I said, Lade, look, this is affecting our ward. It's affecting over 1,000 people that are residents of ours that have voted for us, that who it's our job to represent. Will you be the seconder to my motion? So we can then go to the council with a Lib Dem councillor and a Labour councillor saying the same thing. That is incredibly rare, but also incredibly powerful in politics. So she said, yes, Chris, absolutely. I'll sign it. I was like, brilliant. This is going to be on the agenda. And I thought, great, we can get this through, unanimously. I had spoken to Matt Hartley. He was prepared to support it. But I said, look, I think to keep the Labour group on side, I need a Labour seconder. The deadline for motions to full council came and went. So as far as I was concerned, brilliant. It is on the agenda. And the situation where it had a proposer and a seconder was the place for over a week before the deadline. So as far as I was concerned, we were over the line. Subsequently, my co-colleague Lade withdrew her support for my motion. So withdrew her support for my motion after the deadline. So my motion failed.
Did she give you a reason?
The official reason was that she needed to get agreement from the Labour group, and she was in no such position to have signed my motion in the first place, and thus had to withdraw. But a week had gone by before the deadline for her to have had these conversations and either withdrawn and then given me time to find another seconder. Remember, Councillor Hartley had already said, yes, Chris, I support it. And with he could have swapped with Larde to be the seconder, but it was after the deadline, so my motion fell. So I pleaded with the head of legal and the chief exec that I can get another seconder. Let's just swap the name. But under the constitution, no, I didn't have a seconder, so my motion fell, and it wasn't heard at council. Now, a councillor, I don't know who it was, but made a comment to a local news outlet in Greenwich saying, look, this is incredibly sharp practice going on by the ruling Labour group. I don't know who it was. Could have been a Labour councillor, could have been a Conservative councillor, could have been, you know, anyone. But other councillors recognised how shoddy the situation was. I don't know if Larde was instructed. I don't know the reasons behind Larde's decision. But the consequences were that my motion was not on the agenda and would not have been for several months, because then subsequently there was a series of local council by-elections where a number of councillors resigned, and it meant that controversial, politically sensitive motions couldn't be heard at full council. So that basically meant that my motion was not going to be heard for months, many months. So
to use a technical term, you were screwed. Sorry.
I shafted.
Yeah, absolutely.
And worst of all, the residents of Royal Artillery Quays were shafted.
Well, yes, no offence to yourself, but they were the most important parts of all this. You were seeking to try and prevent the same thing happening again. History is destined to repeat itself if we do not learn the lessons of yesteryear. I don't know who I've misquoted badly from that, but it's the truth. It's disgusting, and I'm sorry, Chris, you had to go through that because you were doing things with best intentions. Steve, let me just pass this.
One final thing: if I could have my time again, I would not have gone to the Labour group, because they made it so that my motion was not heard. I would have gone to another councillor who wouldn't have withdrawn and made it impossible for my motion, which would have made the developers have to spend more money and do more work to make remedial works in Greenwich. It would have made the expectation of Royal Borough of Greenwich that any work done would take it to the safest possible level. I would have gone to another councillor and it would have been heard, and then Labour councillors would have had to make a choice to agree with my non-partisan motion or vote against it. We don't know what would have happened, but they stopped it even getting that far, and that's disgusting.
It is disgusting, and perhaps in hindsight, you should have gone to a group of people with a bit more integrity. Frankly, Steve, Labour councillors notwithstanding, if you would unmute yourself, sorry. What's the situation now? Because I believe you've been working for many months with Lord Lytton to try and create a new standard for building safety, and also in parallel to that, to get Greenwich to recognise that, for instance, XPS panels, which are highly flammable, should be included within the remediations, not just frankly left on, as the builder was suggesting.
Yeah, I mean, so I had a meeting with the building safety regulator yesterday, and I've made the points, that we had a fire engineer at RAC that we sort of had help from, that basically said those panels shouldn't stay on. So we're making that case, and we can do a court order called a remediation order to get these panels removed. So I think we'd be all right on that. Our main issue, as I said, is the internal remediation and the undermining of it by this Greenwich Council finding of no defects, because we need the Type 4 remediation, and we're not going to get it unless we, have every argument on our side. So it means my work is incredibly more difficult.
But what upsets me is you've got members of the public approaching you and threatening in a threatening manner, because they misunderstand this very simple point, which is if you just had the type 2 remediation, you're not making your properties really safer, and more importantly, the insurers won't take any notice of that. You'll still be buggered as far as insurance is concerned.
Yeah, I mean, I think basically for the result to go our way, we need the work to be done in a way which makes them safe, insurable, and sellable. Not just safe, and that safe is for the big asterisk because of the flammable panels staying on. So I think it's very positive that Royal Artillery Keys, the work starts in August. So we have had a big meeting with Barra this week. And, you know, the council has been challenged. It's been in the Sun, the BBC National London News, and it's been in various other publications, you know, trying to get the council to retract that false position. And let's hope they do, because, you know, really, it's been 6 weeks, and all they have to do is say, well, actually, given the evidence we've now seen, that we do agree that there is evidence of building reg breaches at the time of construction, and that's it.
I think if I could come in there,
Chris.
Yeah. If I could just come in very quickly, I think that a lot of pain and anguish could be taken away very, very easily if the leader of Greenwich Council, Councillor Okereke, simply turned around and said, look, I was wrong, we need to get this sorted. But there is an attitude of doubling down. The tone of communications from the political leadership of the council is increasingly of one with a bunker mentality, and it's not of a can-do mindset.
It sounds like a totalitarian dictatorship mindset. Well,
I would recommend that people have a look at the Greenwich Wire news website to see, you know, just a couple of weeks ago, one of my former colleagues, Councillor Ivis Williams, was bullied out of the Labour group in a similar fashion to many over the years, forced to resign, and has triggered another by-election because of the attitude of the political leadership in Greenwich. There are steps that could be taken, and I'm just flabbergasted that they're not. But like I say, it's not my problem. It's a problem for the residents, and it's you know, I'm not in a position anymore to fix it. And to Steve and his neighbours and my former constituents, I'm sorry that I couldn't have done more, because that is a massive regret of mine, actually, that I wasn't able to get you over the line. But I did try my hardest.
I don't think anyone could reasonably ever blame you. Absolutely.
Let me just say something. You know, Chris has been absolutely amazing. He restored our trust of Royal Artillery Keys in local democracy. I mean, he championed this motion, and it's not his fault that it was sabotaged at the last minute. You know, it was a revolutionary idea to actually undo the crimes of the national solution and actually put in a decent local solution that would have benefited, you know, the many tall buildings of Greenwich. It's not just RAC. And he was undermined, but that doesn't mean he was wrong. It means he's probably even more right than we even know now, because that's, of course, what needs to happen. And no, Chris has been a real champion. And, you know, I'm just grateful for his friendship, even though he is in Wales. You know, long may it continue, Chris.
I don't have tall buildings with around me in Powys, I'm afraid. So my skills are wasted.
May I pass over to Hamish? Hamish, you're hearing all this, and it's so frustrating for both of us to hear all this. What is your view here?
Well, I mean, full marks to Chris. I mean, that it does demonstrate the heartfulness of local councillors on what they can do and what they attempt to do on behalf of their residents close to them. And it is very, very interesting to actually sort of see that the person that the Labour Party parachuted in to take over from Chris has never stepped foot in Royal Artillery Keys, yet she is representing them as a councillor. That, to me, is a sad reflection of the type of councillor, to be perfectly honest, should not be elected. However, the situation arises that they can be, because enough people turn up to do it. But it's a great reflection. I think the topic was great. We weren't exactly on topic right the way through, but I think Chris more than demonstrated what he was achieving, what he was attempting to achieve. And Steve wanted to try and continue. And long may people like Steve and Chris continue to do that style of work.
Absolutely. To all of you watching, I know there's plenty of you that are. I would ask that you look into your hearts and perhaps even write a letter, or what's it these days, an email to the leadership team of the council and say, please stop ignoring reality. Please see where there are the issues. Let's move on beyond this point. All we need you to say is, we were wrong. We do agree. Let's move ahead. And even so, I would even say, look at Chris's previous motion. You could learn a lot from that.
They've still got the wording. It'll still be out there. You know, I did circulate it. The wording won't have changed. You know, we'll see.
And you know what? In the words of a track that hopefully soon to be released by myself and Steve, our latest salvo, the end of the track is live up to the trust that the people have in you to do the right thing. That's all we're asking for. We're not asking for miracles here. Just do the damn right thing, please. But all right. It was a pleasure having you on the show, Chris, and Steve as ever. Hamish, would you take us home, please?
Well, there really isn't much that I can add. Just to everybody, when voting is available to you, it is important for you to actually vote for somebody that you actually believe in, somebody who will actually still work on your behalf. So first of all, do think seriously about voting. That makes a difference in the first place. Also, check out the credentials, because most times when these particularly local elections sort of come up, there's a number of people that can represent your views for you. You find the right one. And if they're going to represent those views, they're the one to vote for.
Thank you for that, Hamish. And to all of you watching, please keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the skies, and please try and look after that mental health in these tortuous times. Until next week, bye-bye now.
There's a tale about some folks with hammers and some nails. They'll polish you the moon, but their word always fails.